The unfolding events following the Republic's expose have certainly ignited a firestorm across the nation. The government's promise to reveal the buyers of JAMMEH'S ill-gotten properties, the majority leader's call for a parliamentary inquiry, Hamad Bah's legal threats, the joint summoning of expose author Mustafa Dabo by the Media Council and the National Human Rights Commission, as well as the arrest of youths of the protest movement Gambians Against Looted Assets, paint a picture of potentially deep-seated corruption unearthed by Mustafa Dabo's work. End of quote. Now my guest is one of the people named in the Damning the Republic expose. Abubakar Mari Tambedou, also known as Ba, was the Gambia's Attorney General and Minister of Justice between 2017 and 2020. During that time, he helped set up the Jammeh Commission to look into the financial activities of former dictator Jammeh, those of his family and close associates. After some 2 years of work, the Commission presented its report. Now, reacting to that report, the U.S. Embassy in the Gambia had this advice for the authorities, who included Tambedou at the time. We take this moment to renew our recommendation that government authorities work closely and expeditiously with civil society organizations and the National Assembly to develop strong legislation, strong regulations, and strong rule of law-based investigative and prosecutorial mechanisms to better ensure that persons who abuse their positions of public trust to greedily benefit themselves are held accountable. So while serving as Justice Minister, did Ba Tambedou abuse his position of public trust through his dealings with the Jammeh Commission? You may have your own questions after reading the Mustafa Dabo story. Later I'll be going through some of them. If you'd like to have your say, send me a text to 7711599, WhatsApp or SMS, also 9232333. I should mention that Ba asked specifically to take questions from listeners this morning. That's why I'm inviting you to send in your questions. Ba, thanks for accepting to speak to us this morning. Before we get to the facts about what you did or didn't do, knew or did not know, what's your response to the Republic story on your conduct with the Jammeh Commission?
Thank you very much, Peter. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, I can. You're very, very clear indeed.
Having
yes.
me on this show today. As you would have noticed, this is the first time that I am coming out of my shell since I left public office 5 years ago in 2020. But it is the circumstances presently in the country that has compelled me to come out and to clarify. I see that Gambia is like the mob in ancient Rome these days. One day you are a hero and the next day you are a villain. But more seriously, Peter, I can see the clamor and all the noise about the Jammeh assets after the report in the Republic. There is actually so much noise that I'm sure even those close to me are beginning to have doubts. But I can assure them that their trust and confidence in me is not misplaced, and that by the end of this program today, they will have been reassured. Now, the insults and abuses aside, because we should be able to express ourselves with respect and decorum in a democracy. I have always fought for that in that country. But I also fully accept that the people have a right to demand the truth about the Jammeh assets. And I understand their frustration over the lack of total transparency in the matter. So on my part, let me be clear. I want to encourage the government of the Gambia to share all the information with the public about the assets to allay their concerns. I did so with members of the National Assembly back in 2020, together with a full inventory of items that the Ministry of Justice carried out at the time. Peter, throughout my time as Attorney General, I have never misled the public about anything. And I have had numerous press conferences. I have been the most accessible minister at the time. And I have never also shied away from confronting difficult situations, and people should expect the same today. But also during this period, I have tried my best to treat everyone fairly, even the most notorious killers in our society. And all I ask is to be fairly treated as well. At least don't rush to judgment based on one incomplete side of the story. I have done nothing wrong in all the 3.5 years of my tenure as minister. And I'm sure that when I tell my side of the story, you will see that I have suffered great injustice in the court of public opinion. But I know that the majority of Gambians listening to me today are decent people who will see where the truth lies and where falsehood lies. And perhaps to wrap up in this introduction, I would say this: I had served my country to the best of my ability, and I couldn't have been more grateful for that unique opportunity, which I will always cherish. It has been a privilege to serve the Gambian people. I also know that in the course of my service to the nation, I have made difficult decisions that didn't please some sections of our society. And now, I am being personally blamed. Yes, I have been the face of many of these decisions. But it doesn't mean that I did so in my personal capacity. And to now attribute these actions to me alone as if I made personal choices is unfair and is wrong. This is what I wanted to say as an introduction, following your first question, Peter.
Okay. It's an opportunity, as I said, for you to tell us what is misleading in the report, and for people to know that, as you claim, you've done nothing wrong while acting as Attorney General and Minister of Justice of the Gambia.
Okay. Now, to start with, I think Mustafa could have had a more informed story. With respect,
do bear with us.
To do this, and what we see, in all honesty, Peter, I keep hearing beeps. Am I getting interrupted or?
Yes, every time you hear a beep, it's because we've lost the connection, but you're back on now.
Okay, let me do something. Maybe that there will not be any more. Okay, is this better? Can you still hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. This is much better than we've had until now.
Okay, excellent. Now, I was just saying that in all honesty, Mustafa could have had a more informed story with respect to my part of the report if he had done a little more research into my responses. He failed to do this, and now what we see is the consequence of that failure. In all honesty, it appeared to me, at least from my vantage point, that Mustafa already had a preconceived notion about the facts and went ahead to publish his report. The report was simply unfair to me, and this was regrettable. But the whole premise, really, of Mustafa's process is the judicial process. Mustafa makes the allegation that I basically manipulated a court decision in order to unfreeze the TDA lands to benefit someone who was close to me. Now, the first thing I would say to that is that was not true. I did not seek the unfreezing of the TDA lands based on my personal decision, and neither was it for the purposes of benefiting someone close to me. Back in 2017, I have to provide this context here for your audience. Back in 2017, following the change, we all remember the euphoria in the country, the feeling of freedom and openness, and of course the interest that was shown by outsiders in our country. And one of the entities that showed great interest in the Gambia at the time was FTI, Future Touristic. I don't know what the I means, but FTI was a tourist. They're actually the fourth largest tour operators in Europe. You will remember FTI, Peter. They were in the Gambia, I think sometime in the 90s. They were heavily invested in the tourism sector. They were even sponsoring Steve Biko, if I recall very well, the football team.
That is correct.
They were very involved in the Gambia. So some of the investors who wanted to come and invest in the Gambia at that time included FTI. And so, but when FTI was coming at that time, we had already frozen these assets in May. And we didn't freeze the assets under the Companies Act. That's an also very important distinction. We froze the assets under the Anti-Money Laundering Act. And what that act does is to allow the state to temporarily freeze the assets of a suspect while investigations are ongoing, so that the suspect will not dissipate their assets before the conclusion of the investigations. But anyway, I'll come back to that in a bit. Mm-hmm. So FTI, together with other investors, were flooding the country, but the government was particularly interested to attract FTI. But the other also principal reason why the government was interested in the TDA lands was the impending OIC summit. The government was looking for an ideal location to build the infrastructure for the OIC summit that was impending. So by the time FTI came, we had frozen these TDA lands. So when FTI came, the government assured FTI, and I have attended a few of those meetings. Some were held even in the office of the president, with a number of ministers whose ministries had a say in that matter. So I attended some of them, and FTI clearly expressed its willingness to build a 5-star hotel in the country, and the government was interested in the potential job creation opportunities that come with building that kind of hotel. And there were other investors as well. Some were Spanish, etc., etc. But we were mostly occupied with two entities, or rather two objectives: invite FTI back into the country, and also identify an appropriate location for the OIC infrastructure. Now, you will recall also that when the Janneh Commission was established, their initial mandate was for 3 months.
Yes.
It was for 3 months from the date that they were to operate. So the government assured the FTI that the commission proceedings will not take long. It's 3 months, and that we encourage them to keep their interest in the country until the commission wraps up. Unfortunately, those 3 months became 6 months, they became 9 months, they became 1 year, they became 1 year and 3 months, they became 1 year and 6 months. So it went on and on and on. And the FTI was beginning to basically give up, because at that time they had already gone around the TDA area and identified a potential location for the construction of this 5-star hotel. Unfortunately, the location that they identified fell within the TDA JAMMEH lands that was frozen by the High Court on the request, on the application of the government through the Justice Ministry. So this prolonged period of the Janneh Commission really started to frustrate FTI and the government as well in general, because all the other investors had to now sit and wait until the Janneh Commission proceedings ended. Then we decided in cabinet, it was a cabinet decision, that look, instead of waiting for the Janneh Commission, we've been waiting for a year now and nothing is happening in terms of their conclusion. Why don't we seek to isolate the TDA lands, which are government lands? They're not private properties that former President Jammeh bought. These were not. These were government lands in the tourism development area that was allocated to President Jammeh. Now, the government identified these TDA lands and instructed me as Attorney General to seek the unfreezing of the TDA lands on the basis of the reasons that I have just given to you, that there were potential investors that needed to be given land to invest, and also the OIC, etc.
Just before you continue, just before you continue, so it's land in the TDA allocated to Yaya Jammeh. Is that legal or illegal?
Is what legal? The lands that were allocated to Yaya Jammeh
in the TDA, were they legally allocated or illegally allocated?
They were unlawfully allocated.
Okay, all right.
I will come to that because that we will look at the documents in a minute. I have shared with you some documents, and I would like you to read some of them for us. But anyway, Cabinet instructed me, and there are many people. I mean, I will not say publicly that this was a Cabinet decision. I mean, I would be out of my mind to say something like that when that is not true. And even more, I will be out of my mind to unilaterally make such a policy decision that the government has taken and change it on my own because I have personal motivations. I would perhaps be the maddest man who has ever held public office. But in any event, there are many people in Cabinet at the time who could be contacted, and I think Mustafa missed the opportunity to contact those people following my response to him on this, because I did say clearly that this was a decision by Cabinet. Now, we went to court. We made our application, and the application was denied by the judge. Justice Saho looked at the merits of our application and made her decision, which we respected. Now, after that decision, it became actually a very, very frustrating period for the government. In fact, I will be honest today, that decision was the final blow to getting FTI to continue their interest in the country. Because when we assured them that, look, we will try now to unfreeze this TDA land so that you can proceed with your plans and we will allocate you, the government will allocate you a suitable place, you start building your hotel. They were encouraged by the fact that we were now going to court to unfreeze the lands. It was our last desperate attempt to keep FTI's interest in the country. And so when that decision came, unfortunately, I have to say, FTI, I think, were discouraged by that. And that was what killed FTI's interest in the country. But having said that, in the meantime, we looked at the decision. My office, again, my office is a large office. It has a lot of lawyers. I am, of course, ultimately responsible for decisions that come out of my office, but I don't make decisions alone. I have a team of lawyers who I consult depending on the area of the law. We have a criminal division at the ministry, everybody knows that, and we have a civil litigation division at the ministry. And those divisions are responsible for the day-to-day court activities. And they report to me only when the issues are important enough. And this was one of those issues. In fact, when the decision came out by Justice Sao, I was in Saudi Arabia doing my hajj. That's when my staff contacted me and told me the decision has come out and the judge has ruled against us. Now, Peter, I sent you a batch of documents. I would like you to pick up document that I marked 1A. I sent them to you by WhatsApp. So if you open your WhatsApp, you open the attachments, you will see a document marked 1A. It's actually the first page. Or your email, whichever you open. It was also sent to you by email.
It has to be my WhatsApp. Where's 1A?
Peter, it seems like I was not prepared.
It's right here, 1A. So what section?
Hello, Peter.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you have 1A open, right?
I had 1A open, yes. I'll have to go back there again. You know, I'm not...
I cannot hear you. You need to put your WhatsApp on speaker so that you can also talk to me at the same time.
I can hear you clearly. You're the one having problems hearing me. Can you hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you now, yes. So you have the document marked 1A, right?
Yes.
Okay, now the part that I highlighted at the top, whose name is written there, just under AG Jammeh.
Yeah. But just go ahead, read. I have proof that the document exists because you have shared the document with me. So you just do the reading.
I would have preferred that a neutral person read the email documents that I have sent to you so that it doesn't become just me saying it. It becomes you reading from a document that I shared.
Well, I have.
But if you prefer that
Yes, please, because I can corroborate that such a document exists. Yeah.
Yes, but these are email. They are email documents, and
Yeah.
you know, with emails you can't
Yeah.
play around
Yeah.
with the dates, etc. Anyway, the facts speak for themselves. Now, on 31st of July,
Yes.
on 31st of July, I am underscoring the date here because that is the last date of the court term before the courts go on vacation. It's the last day,
Yes.
31st July. There's a reason why I am underscoring this, because the allegations seem to be that we waited until the vacation period when Justice Saho went on vacation, then we submitted the same application which was given to another judge who didn't know that the same matter was treated by Justice Saho. Again, that is incorrect, but I am pointing this out now. So on 31st of July, the last day of the term before the court went on summer recess, my Solicitor General, General Marina, wrote to me an email and said, AG, please find attached a copy of the ruling delivered by Justice Amina Saho. She has denied the application to unfreeze the TDA lands. Best. I responded on 2nd August. I was in Saudi at the time, as I keep saying. I responded on 2nd August. And I said this, SG, as discussed, we need to explore our options in response to this unfortunate ruling. I already note a number of legal and factual errors from just a cursory reading of the decision. An appeal is a very tempting option, but timing is crucial here. And so we need to balance the competing interests to our advantage. Kindly request DCL is the Director of Civil Litigation, to prepare a short memo to me with the different options at our disposal, bearing in mind the need to urgently overturn this decision in the shortest possible time. So clearly, I have contemplated an appeal, even though the report says instead of the ministry appealing, we went and filed a fresh application. So clearly, you can see from this exchange that an appeal was contemplated. On the same day, 2nd August, that is document number 2A, from Binga Senior, the Director of Civil Litigation, to me. And I read verbatim, Dear AG, following our call yesterday, please find below my thoughts on the filing of an appeal. After reading through the ruling, the judge based the order mainly on the lack of any evidence to show that the Attorney General had concluded his investigations or that the Commission had made certain findings as pertains to the ownership of these properties. She drew contrast to the application to unfreeze the bank accounts where evidence was led to show that the bank accounts actually did not belong to JAMME and as such needed to be taken off the freeze order. I believe these were hints by the court which we could take heed to. I believe this is indeed in line with your instructions conveyed through SG. For GTB, that is the Gambia Tourism Board, to seek a cancellation by the Ministry of Lands. Before delving into that, I believe an appeal might prove the least attractive option to that contained in your initial instructions. Reason being that an appeal filed today will only come up for mention in October after the vacation. Before the records of proceedings are prepared and sent to the court, briefs, orders, and a ruling delivered, it could easily stretch into December 2018. On the other hand, with the current approach, we have conveyed the ruling to Gambia Tourism Board by way of cover letter. Subsequent to a meeting with them, they have this morning responded, raising the issue of the illegality of the leases and requested our legal advice on proceeding with the matter. Lands has been copied. That's the Department of Ministry of Lands has been copied in this letter, and we intend to forward same to Lands for their response. It is anticipated, based on discussions with them, that the response will be an acknowledgement of the illegality of the leases and a request for their cancellation. This is a purely administrative matter which is within the purview of their authority and has the effect of regularizing the land ownership. given that the leases in the first place were null and void. On the basis of the above, we intend to then make our application to the court on similar grounds as the application to unfreeze the bank accounts, on the basis that the concerned properties have not been found to belong to the respondent and all administrative procedures have been complied with to regularize this error, and as such there is need to take them off the list of frozen assets. Furthermore, given that this is not a regular injunction affecting all parties, but rather a restraining order barring the respondent from dealing with said properties, nothing bars the state from carrying out administrative procedures over the said lands. We intend to file this application accompanied by a certificate of urgency for it to be heard as soon as possible this vacation, and do not anticipate any difficulty in this being done. We hope you find the outlined strategy amenable and look forward to receiving your further instructions. Now, clearly, what this exchange shows is that every decision in my ministry is made after consultations with my team, where I seek legal opinion and advice, where they give me options, and I make the final decision based on the array of options that they have presented to me. So it is clear, contrary to the report in the Republic, that instead of us going to file an appeal, we file another fresh application on the same facts, and then another judge gave us the ruling. You can see clearly that first an appeal was an option that we considered, and in view of the urgency of releasing these TDA lands, in order not to miss the opportunity and to also start working on these OIC projects, we decided to adopt a legal strategy that we thought best suited our objective. And lawyers make legal strategies all the time. You have option 1, you have option 2, you have option 3. And that's what we did here. So we filed this first application with this additional or new set of facts, if you like, and presented it and filed it before the High Court. Now, it's the Chief Justice who assigns cases. It's not the Attorney General. So the Chief Justice, in his wisdom, assigned this case to Justice Jaite. But it fell during the vacation because Justice Saho's decision at least was received by the ministry on the 31st of July, the last day of the court term. And the court vacation started on August 1st. So we didn't, the idea that we waited until the vacation and then secretly file a case before the court is totally misleading. That is completely wrong. Our application fell within the vacation simply because the decision by Justice Saho was given on the last day of the court term. So this is the reason why we submitted a fresh application before the High Court. And Justice Jaite has issued a rejoinder saying that he was misquoted by the reporter in the Republic, the author, Mustafa Dabo. Justice Jaite clarified that he didn't say that he was blindfolded and that he decided the matter on the merits of the application presented to him. So this is the starting point, and the reason why I'm starting with this is because it is so fundamental to this whole story. The fact that we conspicuously went to the court and got Justice Jaite to give us a decision without informing him that there was a prior decision by another judge. No. Submitting 2 applications to courts of a similar jurisdiction is not necessarily an abuse or automatically an abuse of process. It depends on a number of things. And I gave Mustafa, again, in order to help him understand these complex legal processes, I gave him the example of bail applications. I said when an applicant applies for bail and the bail is refused, they have the option of appealing against that refusal, or they have the option of bringing another fresh bail application with new or additional reasons. And you will see that consistently, and all the lawyers in Gambia will tell you this, consistently, the default position is to reapply for another bail application based on new or additional information that was not presented in the initial bail application. Hardly a lawyer goes and appeals against a bail application. But to buttress the point finally on this point, that I acted alone in making this application for personal interest is totally unfortunate. Because under the documents that I gave you, under 3A is the affidavit that the Minister of Justice attached to the application and presented before Justice Jaite. The affidavit was sworn to by Keba Sise, the Director of the Department of Lands. Keba Sise, who was the Director of the Department of Lands. That's one. Before we went to court, we had cautiously said, well, let's approach the JAMMEH'S Commission first, since they are seized of this inquiry, to request for their no objection so that the TDA lands would be unfrozen. We wrote to the JAMMEH'S Commission requesting their no objection, and the JAMMEH'S Commission responded to the ministry. It's all documented, giving their no objection to us applying for this unfreezing order. And consequently, if you look at the decision of the High Court, which I have marked as 4B, Justice Jaite refers to the affidavit sworn to by Keba Sise, the Director at the Department of Lands. So all in all I'm trying to say here is that I did not act alone. It would be crazy for me to get up based on my own personal interest to seek to unfreeze an entire TDA land which covered from Sanyang or Batokunku all the way to Palmarima Junction, just because I wanted someone close to me to be giving a small portion of land out of that. It's an incredible theory. And again, like I said, Mustafa should have done more with his research. I, of course, respect his work. I have admired his work in the past, no doubt about it. But I think on this occasion, I think he will be the first to acknowledge that he fell short of the standards that he had put for himself in the past. But anyway, my responses were to guide him to further inquire, because when I mentioned cabinet, when I mentioned the decision by the ministry, etc., he should have gone on to investigate. But here is the thing, though, in this matter, which worries me, and it worries me a lot. Mustafa, I understand the Republic was investigating the JAMMEH'S assets for nearly 2 years. Nearly 2 years. Mustafa knows me very well, and I know him very well. The only moment that the Republic reached out to me for my reaction to their report was on Friday, the 25th of April. They sent me a long list of questions and said, can you provide answers to this? Friday, 25th of April. And I wrote back and said, wow, these are long questions. How long do I have? And they wrote back to me and said, I have until Wednesday, the 30th of April, 5 days. Now, I have a very busy schedule at work. I could have been traveling. Luckily, I am not traveling. I am at base. But I could have been in other parts of the world where I would not be able to access perhaps some of the information that I was able to put together. In any event, I managed to put together a comprehensive response to Mustafa's questions and sent that to them on the 30th of April. On that same 30th of April, Mustafa published the report. Now, I will leave these facts for the public to judge. Given the comprehensive responses that I gave, which is why I reproduced those responses in my rejoinder, because I wanted the public to see the question and answers between myself and the Republic. And anyone who dared look at that exchange, you will see how lengthy and comprehensive my responses were. And for me to send those responses on the day that I was asked to send it on 30th, and then turn around to see Mustafa publish his article on that same day. Now, it's obvious that Mustafa did not consider at all or with any serious effort the responses that I gave to him. That's why I said right from the start that I honestly believe that Mustafa had a preconceived notion of the facts, and he went ahead to publish his report regardless of what my responses would be. So that's the fact in terms of the publication of the report and my responses. But I have to say this as well, though. maybe this is where I will stop, Peter, until you come back with your questions.
Would you like to address the issue of your relationship with, is it Alpha Capital Advisory?
Absolutely. I was coming to that as perhaps my last point, because Mustafa basically made two allegations against me, and they are both related to conflict of interest issues. We have to be clear about that. He didn't say I was involved in embezzlement. He didn't say I was involved in conversion. And he didn't say I was involved in undervaluation of property, except in one case. And I'll come back to that case. So out of the 44 properties that were sold while I was in office, from the 288 total properties. So there were 288 properties that the Jari Commission identified for forfeit, for the state to forfeit. And 44 were sold up until the time I left. And out of that 44, I'm sure Mustafa has that list. He only identifies one property that he says was undervalued. And I'll come back to that later. But the relationship with Alpha Bay of Alpha Capital. Now, Mustafa's allegations to me are twofold. One, that I manipulated a court process to obtain the order for personal gain. I have addressed that as my first part here. I'll move to the second part, which is that I appointed Alpha Capital, which is run by Mr. Alpha Bay, who is my friend, who in turn appointed my future wife as his sales agent. Let me first address the second part about the sales agent. And this is also contained in my rejoinder and a response to Mustafa. The process of the sale of the assets by Alpha Capital was done through a closed bidding process. Now, for those who don't understand this, because to my surprise, when I exchange with people, they don't understand what a closed bidding process is. So I will explain so that people can understand. And the point here I'm trying to make is that how can you have a sales agent in a closed bidding process? What would be the role of a sales agent? It does not make sense. So a sales agent is a scenario where the seller of the item would advertise the item and invite people to bid for that item and would give conditions for the bidding, including the fact that the bid must, of course, be clearly identified. It must specify the amount that is being bidded, and it must be placed in an envelope and sealed in a certain way. And then submitted to whoever is making the advertisement for that item. But in the advertisement, a guide price is given. And in this case, what we did was, if you look at the Jani Commission report, the valuation price are indicated in the report. But what Alpha Capital did here was to commission a second independent valuation by an independent valuer and took the higher of the two valuation prices as the guide price. So we didn't just take the valuation of the Jani Commission, which was conducted by government officials. We commissioned a second valuation, and the higher of those two valuations was used as the guide price. And that's why I want the government to release all this information, because the people will be shocked at the level of success of this process. Some of the items were sold in the end. They fetched almost twice the valuation prices. So again, this is where we are. So this going back to the closed bidding process, this is how it works. So people will send in their bids in envelopes sealed to the address given. Those bids will be taken to the Ministry of Justice in the office of the Solicitor General, in whose presence all the bids are open and the highest bidder is identified. Now, what will be the role of a sales agent in such a process? Who will they be the agent for? When the bids are closed, they are sealed in an envelope and submitted by the people who are interested in the particular item. In this case, in the properties that were being advertised. And they were advertised in the local newspapers in the country, and they were advertised through the website as well, so that those outside the country can have an opportunity to also bid for these properties. So we leave aside the issue of the sales agent. There's no role for a sales agent in this. And I have mentioned to Mustafa, I was very honest, perhaps maybe too honest with him. Because I said maybe people have seen the sales agent, the so-called sales agent around my office around the same time that the Janneh properties were being sold. But she was helping me to sell a family property around that same time. We started engaging Alpha Capital to sell the properties in June. In July, I had instructed the so-called sales agent to find me a buyer for a family property that is located in Fayara. I can even give the description of the property. It's situated next to the Goddard family in Fayara, opposite the Taylor Thomases. And I even provided to Mustafa the name of the purchaser, Abdul Sanyang. And I gave Mustafa the number of the purchaser and said, contact him, he will verify this information for you. Not only that, I also said to Mustafa, if you want, I will provide you with the power of attorney that was given to the so-called sales agent, and I will provide you with a copy of the deed of assignment that was executed on behalf of the purchaser by lawyer Bola Kawal, who represented Mr. Abdul Sanyang in this transaction, so that you can follow up and verify that what I am telling you is indeed the truth. But again, Mustafa did not follow up. Disappointingly, he didn't. And that's unfortunate as well, because if he did, he would have confirmed the story that I gave to him. So that's about the sales agent. Let's go back to the appointment of Alpha Capital. The first point to make is that Alpha Capital's appointment was approved by the ministerial committee. You see, in this Republic story, they completely ignored the existence of the ministerial committee. And I am happy that the Justice Ministry issued a statement to reaffirm that indeed there was a ministerial committee consisting of the ministers of lands at the time, ministers of tourism, ministers of agriculture, and the minister of justice. These four ministries constituted the ministerial committee, and they were selected based on the location of the properties that were listed on the Janneh Commission report, because some of these properties were agricultural land. So we invited the Minister of Agriculture. Some were TDA land or found in the TDA area. We invited the Minister of Tourism. Some were land generally in the country. So the Ministry of Lands is generally responsible for land administration in the country. And the Justice Ministry, which oversaw the entire process of asset recovery, from the institution of the Commission of Inquiry to the implementation of the white paper, etc. And so these were the ministries that were brought together, and this was established by the President of the Republic, His Excellency Adam Barrow. And the Office of the President can confirm this information. In any event, the Justice Ministry has already confirmed this information to the public. And the Ministerial Committee in turn established a technical committee which comprised the Solicitor General and the permanent secretaries of these four ministries plus the Finance Ministry. So you had one more ministry involved at the technical level, above the ministerial level. And this technical committee were tasked to go through the Janneh Commission report, to look at the properties, and to advise the ministerial committee on usage. Which properties should be sold, which properties should be reserved for government use, which properties the government should, government offices should be allocated. So that technical committee did their report and presented it to the ministerial committee. And the ministerial committee went through that list and endorsed or approved as they saw fit, which is why ultimately we chose as the first phase 44 properties out of the 288 for Alpha Capital. Now, my relationship with Alpha Capital, which raises questions of conflict of interest, is this. I have a good relationship with Mr. Alpha Barry now. But at the time that the ministerial committee was tasking Mr. Alpha Barry, he was not a friend of mine, neither was he an acquaintance. In fact, I have heard a lot about Mr. Alpha Barry, certainly, and so has many other people. He is a household name in chartered accountants. He is one of the leading chartered accountants in that country. I heard about him since his days at Deloitte and Touche. Deloitte and Touche, we all know, is a reputable international firm of chartered accountants or auditors. Anyway, I first met Mr. Alpha Barry in my office in 2018. he had come together with Mr. Mustafa Njai of TAF Global and other representatives of the FTI group. Again, going back to the question of FTI, they wanted, I believe they were referred to me by my ministerial colleagues, but they wanted to have an indication of the timelines when I think the TDA lands would be freed up so that they can advise FTI can plan properly, because we're talking about a huge investment portfolio here. And you don't just get up and act on them. You have to plan. So they wanted to know the timelines, etc. And I provided Mustafa this information again in my response. Now, again, Mustafa should have reached out to someone like Mr. Mustafa Njai of TAF Global to confirm an information like this. Because these are important. We are talking about the reputation and integrity of people. And the fact that he didn't do that when I provided this response to them is another disappointing act on his part. But that's when I met Mr. Alpha Barry for the first time in 2018. Now, in terms of the appointment of Mr. Alpha Barry, you know, people will say things today, 6-7 years after the event, with a pair of glasses in 2025, and not look back at the time in 2017, 2018, 2019, when we are just a year or 2 or 3 years even into the chain. It was a very challenging period. And many appointments at the time were done based on certain objective criteria, such as reputation, character, integrity, independence, non-affiliation to political parties, etc. And whoever fitted those criteria were identified and appointed to carry out different activities. It was in the same spirit that members of the Janneh Commission were identified. So was Justice Mr. Swahata Janneh, Baima Sen, Abiyose George. It was in the same spirit that the Council Ami Bensouda was appointed. It was in the same spirit that the Secretary to the Commission, Alhaji Mamadi Kurang, was identified and appointed. It doesn't mean that these were the most qualified in the country, but based on our criteria at the time, we made the assessment and made the conscious decision to identify and appoint these people. It was the same for the TRC process.
I was just going to say, Peter? You just mentioned Mamadi Kurang. Can you just talk about your relationship with him, because that also came up in the report?
Yep. Alhaji Mamadi Kurang perhaps also disappointed me a lot. I knew Mr. Mamadi Kurang from my days in St. Augustine's. He used to be my head boy. And in those days, when you are a head boy in a high school like St. Augustine's or the Gambia High School, it meant something. It represented something. Even mayor prefects meant something in terms of symbolism and integrity and character, let alone a head boy. So I had a lot of respect for Alhaji Kurang as my former head boy at St. Augustine's. And so when in the course of identifying a secretary, you know, as I said, we wanted an independent person. We could have easily taken a from all previous commissions had public servants as their secretaries. But in this case, we wanted a totally independent commission. In fact, there were some professional groups that visited the Gambia at the time, went to the Janneh Commission, and were so impressed with our setup that they told, and Ami Bensouda will confirm this, they told Ami Bensouda that they would like other countries to emulate what we have established in the Gambia. That's how impressive they were with the commission and the independence that was granted to the commission. And Alhaji was granted a lot of independence. And so we identified Alhaji on that basis as well and appointed him. Now, if you appoint a secretary to be in charge of the secretariat, there are certain responsibilities that are his, because the commissioners have their responsibilities. Alhaji had his responsibilities as secretary to the commission, and Ms. Bensouda, the lead counsel, and her team had their responsibilities, including investigations. Now, I am not going to go into the merits or demerits of Alhaji's acquisitions, but I'll focus on the process. When Alhaji had issues surrounding the tractors or any other issue or items, He didn't come to me as the ministry or the appointing authority. I mean, through me, that the president appointed. So it was on my recommendation. He didn't come to the ministry. He knew my Solicitor General very well. They are from the same Kudang village. He didn't go to the Solicitor General. He didn't come to me. And when I contacted the commissioners, just Commissioner Swahata Jane, by Masen and Abiose George, all three of them were invited to my office. And I asked them, did the secretary consult or inform you of these issues before he wrote to the office of the president? And they said, no, he never did so. And of course, I reached out naturally as a first step to Ms. Bensouda to hear her side, because I always believe in natural justice at a minimum, the right to fair hearing. I don't just jump on one side of a story. That's how I have lived my life. So I reached out to Mrs. Bensouda and asked for her side of the story, and she gave me, and I said, did Alaji ever raise these issues with you? And she said, no. And then the question was, can you continue to work with him under these circumstances? Ms. Bensouda, lead counsel, said, no, she can't. The commissioners who were meeting with me, Commissioner Swahata Jane, Commissioner Baima Sen, Commissioner Abiose George, told me in my office that they also could not continue to work with Alaji because there has been a breakdown of trust. And the question now is, okay, what do we do in a situation like this? Do we get rid of all three commissioners, get rid of the lead counsel and her team, and keep the secretary there and start all over again? It was a difficult choice. So when we went through the complaint and looked, we also realized that really there is nothing in those complaints. When you make an allegation, you have to back it up with evidence. We are lawyers. We are not members. We base our decisions on evidence. So when Alaji couldn't bring the evidence, and I asked him to bring evidence of what he said, well, he said, well, I don't have the physical evidence, but I was there, I know what I'm saying. But that's not enough, especially if you cannot corroborate what you're saying. He didn't bring anybody else to say, yes, it's true, this is what is happening, and Alaji is right. So in those circumstances, I called Alaji in my office again. And I said to him, Alaji, I am sorry this is a difficult situation for all of us. And let's find the best way out for everybody. I don't want anyone to be scared by this. I went to seek you out to come and play this role as secretary. So I was the one who went out to get you. I have brought you here. Now this situation has emerged, and really under the circumstances, I can't have you to continue in the commission because there has been a breakdown of trust between you and lead counsel, between you and the commissioners. So what I would ask you to do, and I'm making this confession for the first time here in public, I said to him, I don't want to take action where your credibility will be damaged. In the event in future you want to apply for something and you are told that you were sacked at a particular place. So instead of taking that route, which would dent your record, I encourage you to submit your resignation so that it will be you who has resigned rather than the government or the president that has sacked you. That way, you live with your dignity, you live with your head high, and nothing stains your record as such. That's what I said to Alaji between us in my office. Because I didn't like the situation in which I found myself, but I am one who doesn't shy away from making decisions, even if they are difficult. And those that I have worked with know this. I think the whole country knows this, because I have made very, very difficult decisions while I was there.
Okay.
So when I gave that opening to Alaji, he simply turned it down. He said, no, I am not going to resign. I'm going to stay on. And I said, Alaji, you are leaving me with no option in that case. He says, well, I am not going to resign. Consequently, I consulted with one or two people in my office, and then I advised the president to terminate the appointment of Alaji, because I couldn't have a situation where the secretary, who has no active role in the proceedings, well, not active, but his role is limited to administrative, and he is not a commissioner. He doesn't decide on the facts. He doesn't decide on the evidence. He is not lead counsel who is leading and helping the commission to establish the facts, who has a team of investigators who are already working and they've been working together. I can't dismantle all of that just because one man has made an unsubstantiated allegation. No matter how respectful I am of that person, I cannot act on that basis. So this is the reason why Alhaji was ultimately removed. And even, you will recall, when I made my press conference about Alhaji, I said his position was no longer tenable. Those are the words I carefully used because I didn't want to say anything bad about anyone, especially if I was the one who sought him out and gave him that responsibility. And I tried to reason with him. I tried to make sure that he left honorably without his record being stained, but he refused. He left us with no choice at the time. So I went to advise the president. I was the one, and I accept full responsibility for that decision. I was the one who advised the president to terminate the appointment of Alhaji because there was a breakdown of trust. Alhaji could no longer work with the commissioners. He could no longer with council. So I didn't have a choice. Okay. That was the situation with Mr. Mamadi Koang.
Okay. Speaking of, denting images, I'll ask you in a moment how, the Republic report might have dented your image. But one more thing that I need you to address is, the termination or ending of the Augustus Prom contract in favor of Alpha Capital Advisory, because that seems to be the insinuation in the report. Or let me just say that's another thing that you could be directly linked with.
Yep, it was not an insinuation. It was clearly spelled out in the report that I sacked Augustus Prom and replaced the court-appointed receiver and replaced replaced Augustus Prom with Alpha Capital. Of course, that's a very important part of the story. Now, you see, when we were looking at the options to freeze JAMMEH'S property.
Yeah, we are reconnecting.
Still alive?
Yes, we're back.
Still here? Yes, we're back. Okay.
Restart, yes.
Okay. My party, who was Interior Minister at the time, will confirm this to you. When we were looking at options for the freezing of the assets, Mai even suggested in cabinet, I recall that why don't I use the civil law procedure of Mareva injunctions? And I recall and said, okay, Mai, we will take that into account, but let's look at a process that we think is better suited. And the idea was we didn't want to have a blanket freezing order because we were going to freeze companies that were still in operation. We had people who were still employed. Now, no matter what Yahya Jammeh has done, his actions should not affect ordinary Gambians who are earning a living from those companies, including the abattoir in Abuko. So a total freeze would have meant that all those companies would have been shut, and people would have been out of work. So we looked at the different options under the law. And the law on the Anti-Money Laundering Act was brought to my attention, which provided that we can temporarily freeze the assets pending investigations into JAMMEH'S activities and appoint an interim receiver. An interim receiver means a receiver on a caretaker basis until the investigations are concluded. I looked at the provisions of the Anti-Money Laundering Act and it suited perfectly for our purposes because based on the information that we received from the Financial Intelligence Unit at the Central Bank, former President Jammeh was clearly involved in money laundering activities. So we identified the acts of money laundering and we went to court. But before we did that, I was advised again within the ministry that Augustus Prom had the experience of acting for the government as receiver. So I invited Augustus Prom to my office. And I discussed with Augustus Prom. We negotiated and agreed on a fee. And it was on the basis of that agreement that the ministry submitted the application for the freezing order together with the recommendation to appoint Augustus Prom as the receiver ad interim. So it was not the court that identified Augustus Prom. No, it was not the court that looked out for Augustus Prom. No, it was the Justice Ministry under me who invited Augustus Prom, had an agreement with Augustus Plum, and then went to court to seek the freezing order and to ask for the court to appoint Augustus Plum until the end of investigations. That's the first part on Augustus Plum. The second part is that Augustus Plum was never sacked. That is also untrue, and I explained all of this to Mustafa in my responses to him. Again, I was disappointed that he didn't reflect these responses. So, when Augustus Plum was appointed by the court, he continued to manage the companies, etc., as the caretaker receiver, so the interim receiver. And I tell you this, Peter, we would not have changed Augustus Plum had it not been for the fact that the Janneh Commission report recommended for the appointment, for Augustus Plum to be replaced. It was a specific recommendation of the Janneh Commission, and I refer every interested reader to volume 4 of the Janneh Commission report, and in a number of places, and I can provide these pages for people, in a number of places. Maybe perhaps I can do that. On page 18, page 52, page 85, page 119, page 172, volume 4 of the Janneh Commission report clearly spells out that Augustus Plum should be replaced. Now, if the Janneh Commission made that recommendation and the government accepted the recommendations of the Janneh Commission, except for a few where we disagreed, and we provided the reasons in the white paper, but almost 98-99% of the Commission recommendations were accepted, including the fact that the Commission has said we should replace Augustus Plum. But when the Janneh Commission did so, we had two options. We could have gone back to court, to the judge who appointed Augustus Plum on our recommendation and say, the Janneh Commission has requested for us to replace the receiver, and we are coming here to terminate the appointment of Augustus Plum as a result. Or we allowed the duration of Augustus Plum's contract to run naturally until it elapsed and to end the matter there quite neatly. We opted for the latter. We opted to allow Augustus Plum's mandate to continue until the expiry of the 180-day period that the freezing order was valid for. At the expiry of that period, we didn't renew the mandate of Augustus Plum. So he was not terminated, he was not sacked. We didn't renew his mandate because the Janneh Commission made those recommendations. So that is why Augustus Plum was replaced as receiver.
Okay.
Is there any
finally,
question?
Lots of questions. Unfortunately, we can't keep you on forever because we've already eaten 10 minutes into someone else's time, and it's a Friday, and there's an Ustaz waiting to come in and do his Friday program. I would have loved to take questions for you, but there's one particular question I would want to ask, but I need to build up to it with a statement. Maybe you have seen this statement. The Gambia Press Union saying it has learnt with shock an attempt by the leadership of the Media Council of the Gambia and the National Human Rights Commission to get the Republic to issue a statement that seeks to exonerate you, former Justice Minister Abubakar Tambedou, of any alleged wrongdoing in a story published by the investigative outlet on April 30th, 2025, as the paper puts it. And a question has come in saying, has Mr. Tambedou been contacted by either the NHRC or the Media Council regarding this proposed, quote, joint statement with Mustafa Dabo? Because it does go on to suggest that in an attempt to protect the reputation of the former minister, the MCG's executive secretary by Emil Toure invited Mustafa K. Dabo, the outlet's editor-in-chief, to a meeting with the Media Council that was scheduled for the 6th of May at the NHRC office in Kotu without any prior notice of the subject of the meeting. And apparently at this meeting was also present the chairman of the NHRC. Did you at any point contact the NHRC or the MCG, Media Council of the Gambia, about this story?
Now, Peter, I will also crave your indulgence that after responding to this, I have one more thing to say. I hope you will allow me the time. But I'll respond to this first, which is that I do not want to speak for the persons who have been mentioned in that press statement. But as far as I know,